Let me ask you something. When a couple breaks up, who do you picture crying on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m.? Who do you picture texting their friends, processing every little detail, letting it all out? Yeah, it's almost never the guy. And that image, that assumption, has been so deeply baked into the way we see relationships that most people just accept it as fact. Women hurt more, men move on faster. That's just how it is. Except that's not what the data says. Because when researchers actually started looking at what happens to men after a breakup, not what men say, not what they post, not how they act at the bar 2 weeks later, but what actually happens inside, physiologically, psychologically, over time, the picture looks completely different. Men don't hurt less, they just hurt differently. And in a lot of cases, they hurt longer. In this video, we're going to break that down across 2 chapters. First, we look at the reality that most men are never allowed to talk about. Then we get into the science of why this happens, where dating apps fit into all of this, and what the research actually says about getting through it.
Imagine 2 people and a 3-year relationship. Same breakup, same conversation, same moment the door closes. Now follow both of them for the next 6 months. The woman calls her best friend that same night. She cries. She talks about it. She processes it out loud with other people over and over until slowly, gradually, it starts to hurt a little less. The man? He texts his boys, "Yo, what are we doing tonight?" And they never bring it up again. And from the outside, it looks like he's fine. It looks like he moved on. It looks like it didn't even matter. But here's the thing, not talking about pain doesn't make it go away. It just changes where it goes. A study published in the Journal of Men's Health found that men are significantly less likely to seek emotional support after a breakup compared to women. Not because they feel less, but because they've been socialized their entire lives to treat emotional expression as weakness. You've heard it since you were a kid. Man up, don't cry, get over it, be strong. So they do. Or at least, they perform that, on the outside. On the inside, the data tells a very different story. Research consistently shows that men experience higher rates of depression following relationship dissolution than women do. A large-scale study out of Stockholm University tracked thousands of individuals after breakups and found that men were considerably more likely to develop depressive symptoms, and those symptoms lasted longer. And it gets more serious than that. The link between relationship loss and mental health crisis in men is not a small footnote. Multiple studies, including research published in Social Psychiatry and Psychiatric Epidemiology, have found that men who go through breakups or divorces face significantly elevated risks of depression, substance abuse, and in the most extreme cases, ideation. The rate among single and divorced men compared to their partnered counterparts is one of the most stark statistics in all of mental health research. In the United States, divorced men are up to 2.5 times more likely to die by suicide than divorced women. 2.5 times. That number doesn't sound like a group of people who are fine. Now here's where it gets psychologically interesting. Because the reason men hit their emotional low point later than women comes down to how each gender processes loss in the first place. Women, generally speaking, tend to front-load the grief. They feel it hard and fast. They lean on support systems. They talk. They cry. It's brutal in the beginning, but that processing actually works. It moves the emotion through. Men tend to backload it. The denial, the distractions, the "I'm good" phase can last weeks or even months. And then somewhere down the line, when the noise dies down and they're alone, it hits. And there's nothing in place to catch it because they never built that support system to begin with. A study from Binghamton University asked over 5,000 people across 96 countries to rate the emotional and physical pain of breakups. Women rated higher initial pain, but men showed significantly more difficulty moving on long term. So yes, women might cry first, but men tend to carry it longer, and nobody's talking about that.
So we know men hurt more than they let on and take longer to recover. But why? What is actually happening underneath that makes breakups hit men this hard? There are 3 main reasons backed by research: attachment, identity, and isolation. And they all feed into each other. Attachment theory, originally developed by John Bowlby and later expanded by researchers like Cindy Hazan and Philip Shaver, explains how humans form emotional bonds and what happens when those bonds are broken. Here's what's relevant for men specifically. Research shows that in heterosexual relationships, men tend to become more emotionally dependent on their partners than women do. Not because men are weaker, but because of how male friendships typically function. Think about it. Male friendships, especially in adulthood, tend to be activity-based. You play basketball together, you watch the game, you grab food. What they often are not is emotionally intimate. Men rarely open up to their friends the way women open up to each other. So what ends up happening is that the romantic partner becomes the primary and sometimes the only source of emotional intimacy in a man's life. His person, his outlet, his safe space. When that relationship ends, he doesn't just lose a girlfriend or a wife. He loses his entire emotional support structure in one conversation. Women, on average, maintain deeper emotional friendships outside of romantic relationships. So when a breakup happens, they already have a network to fall back on. For men, that network often doesn't exist in the same way. Now let's talk about identity. This one is underrated. A lot of men, especially in long-term relationships, build a significant part of their identity around being someone's partner. The boyfriend, the husband, the provider, the protector. That role becomes part of who they are. When the relationship ends, they don't just lose the person, they lose a version of themselves. And that kind of loss is genuinely disorienting in a way that takes real time to work through. Psychologists call this self-concept disruption. Research from Northwestern University found that the more intertwined your self-concept is with a partner, the more painful and prolonged the recovery from a breakup tends to be. And men, due to the relational dynamics we just talked about, tend to be more intertwined in this way. And then there's the dating app trap. Here's where it gets modern and a little uncomfortable. Within weeks of a breakup, a lot of men download Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, whatever's popular right now. And on the surface, it looks like confidence. It looks like moving on. It looks like they're fine. But research on rebound behavior tells a different story. A study published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior found that people who engage in rebound relationships or casual dating shortly after a breakup, particularly men, often do so as an avoidance mechanism rather than a genuine readiness to move forward. It's distraction dressed up as progress. And here's the cruel irony of dating apps specifically for men. The experience is often demoralizing. Multiple studies on dating app usage have shown that men receive significantly less engagement than women on these platforms. A study by the analytics firm Hinge found that the bottom 78% of men are competing for the bottom 22% of women in terms of engagement. The numbers on other platforms are similarly skewed. So a man who is already emotionally raw, already dealing with a hit to his self-worth, already isolated, goes onto a dating app and gets almost no matches. Or gets matches that go nowhere. And instead of processing the breakup, he's now also processing rejection on top of rejection, in an environment specifically designed to keep him coming back for more. It's not healing, it's numbing. And numbing delays everything. So what does the research say actually helps? First, and this sounds almost too simple, naming the emotion. There's a concept in psychology called affect labeling, studied extensively by researcher Matthew Lieberman at UCLA. His work using brain imaging showed that when people put feelings into words, it actually reduces the intensity of those feelings at a neurological level. Saying I feel abandoned or I feel like I lost my identity is not weakness. It is literally one of the most effective emotional regulation tools your brain has access to. Second, rebuilding social depth, not just social activity. Going out more doesn't fix isolation. Having one real conversation with a friend, where you actually say how you're doing, that moves the needle. Research on male friendships and mental health consistently shows that the quality of emotional connection matters far more than the quantity of social interactions. Third, physical activity is genuinely one of the most well-documented tools for emotional recovery. not as a distraction, but as a biological reset. Studies on exercise and depression show consistent improvements in mood, self-concept, and emotional resilience. It's not a cliche, it's biochemistry. And finally, time without avoidance, meaning letting yourself actually feel it. The research on grief, including work by psychologist George Bonanno, shows that people who allow themselves to process difficult emotions rather than suppress them consistently show better long-term outcomes. The pain of a breakup, when you actually sit with it, has a shelf life. The avoidance is what keeps it alive indefinitely. So here's where we land. The idea that men get over breakups faster, that they feel less, that they move on easier, is not just wrong, it's genuinely harmful, because it convinces men that what they're feeling isn't real or isn't allowed, and that silence is strength. The data says the opposite. Men hurt deeply. They just do it quietly, alone, and for longer than anyone realizes. And the first step to changing that is just knowing it. Recognizing that what you feel after a loss is real. It's documented, it's human, and it deserves to be dealt with the same way you deal with any other serious thing in your life. With attention and honesty. If this video made you think of someone, send it to them. Sometimes that's the whole conversation. And if you want more videos like this, you know what to do. See you in the next one.